Welcome to the Real Advisor Podcast. TRAP, TRAP. Please follow us and join in the conversation on Twitter @Advisor Podcast, where you can suggest ideas and themes you'd like the TRAP team to discuss. Also remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a 6 out of 5-star review on iTunes. Doing all this really helps us, which means we can do more to help you. Now let's head over to the studio for the latest pile of TRAP.
Yes, indeed, dear Trappists. Welcome back to what many people are calling episode 41 of the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, TRAP. My name is Lick Lincoln, and joining me as ever in the digital studio of doom are the three other horsemen of the apocalypse.
Hello.
Andy Ultra Hart, Carl Della Voce Widger, and Alan the Storyteller Smith. Now, gentlemen, we have a show packed full of absolutely nothing. So let's start unpacking it straight away with some more high-energy review reads read out by my good friend, the Right Honourable Mr. Andrew Hart.
Thank you, Lick. We've got a couple of reviews today. The first up is from Mr. Pep79, entitled Clap Trap 5 stars. I've been listening to half a dozen episodes of Trap now and find it really helpful. So many opinions forthcoming from people in this profession, many of whom have never sat in front of a client for years or if ever. So it's great to hear the experiences and ideas from others who are actually at the coalface for a change. Keep up the great work. My favourite podcast. Also, thanks Alan for the recommendation on the Schultz headphones. Now I'm able to listen during my morning swim. It was tongue in cheek, Alan.
There we
Looking
go.
forward to my first hum event in a few months' time. A clap for Trap from Michael from Spent Time Limited. Thanks for putting your name and firm. Final review is from Nuanda57, entitled 7 stars, 5 stars. My favourite podcast, and I'm not an IFA. Just a recently retired engineer. My son is and has just taken his final exams to become a chartered financial planner, unlike Nick. I love the banter, piss-taking, innuendo, and your searing honesty. My highlight is Carl's expert summary of active management in episode 25. Keep up the great work. Chris from Cheshire. Back to you, Nick.
Lovely man, Chris. Well done, Chris.
Good stuff. Thank you, Trappists, for the reviews, and thanks for using your names. You don't have to, but it just engenders a sense of community. And please do leave a review on iTunes if you possibly can. 6 out of 5 stars. That's all we ask. We're not needy. We're just grossly insecure. Okay, let's put a timestamp on episode 41 of the Real Advisor Podcast with some topical tidbits. Mr. Smith, you're going somewhere cold, wet and miserable. Not Scotland. Where are you going?
Further north. Yes, by the time this episode goes out, I shall be on my way to the Arctic Circle, North Norway, flying into Tromsø in the north of Norway, and then spending the subsequent 3.5 days, trekking 80 kilometers across 3 countries, Norway, Finland, and Sweden, within the Arctic Circle. So it's at that point, I agreed to do this about a year ago. And this is a classic, in the bar, chit-chatting about this and that. I go, this would be a grand idea, wouldn't it, boys? It looks doable. And then it's a few days away from the actual, the moment of truth. So I hope I'll survive. Yeah, thanks. That's how I'll be feeling in about 4 days from now. It looks quite tough, actually. So it's 3 different things. There will be walking/running one day.
Walking.
Walking. Yeah. Although walking with, there's a bit of snow up there. That's the issue. It's walking with those, I think it's those tennis rackets on your shoes, on your feet. Those, I don't know what they're called.
Shoes on your loafers.
Yeah. And then it's skiing one day. Now, I've done a fair bit of skiing. I thought that would be all right, but it's not nice downhill skiing. We get momentum. It's just cross-country stuff. Just walking
it's like
these
the
big,
toughest
long
sport in the world, isn't it? Cross-country skiing.
That'll be a full-body workout, that will be.
I've literally never done it in my entire life before. Never strapped on those skis before, but I'm sure it's one of those ones, it will be fine. How difficult can it be? And then one day cycling, and then, cycling sounds easy enough, but it's on these fat tire bikes across snow. I mean, snow is just not the most conducive material to be cycling across. Anyway, it's one of these things I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I've had to be looking at it more recently to work out all my kit that I need to bring. Anyway, I spent a fortune on Amazon the other day getting all the kit. So I do wonder why we do these things. Carl, was it last year about this time that you did the half marathon? Did you?
Yeah.
Rome?
It was actually, it was this time last year.
Go.
Yeah, and it finished me forever. Anyway, you know the term FOMO, Alan?
Yeah.
I don't have
Not having it.
It's called
No FOMO.
Joy of missing out. JOMO.
JOMO.
You're not selling it to me. Anyway, have a blast. I'm sure you'll come back and go, I found the bar, lads.
Is there any pubs on the way? I was going to say.
There is a pub. We're all meeting in the pub in Tromsø the night before we set off. Let's
3 days later, you'll still be there if you've got any brains.
Yeah, anyway,
okay.
so that was it. Just a timestamp. I'll let you know how we get on the next episode.
Good man. Good.
Right.
It'll be fun. You'll look back on it with fond memories. Wodge, Irish banks.
Yeah, so in Ireland, we basically have 2.5 banks left, and they're all Irish owned now because the likes of KBC and Ulster Bank packed their tents and moved away. So we have very little competition. I would say we've bugger all competition with in the banking sector. And AIB, Allied Irish Banks, and Bank of Ireland both announced their results last week, and they returned 1.9 billion and 2.1 billion in terms of profitability, which is obviously very good considering both these banks needed to be bailed out back in the financial crisis by the Irish government. But anyway, the shareholders are very happy because they're sending back some dividends. Staff less so because for some reason they've decided not to pay full bonuses. But I suppose why it's relevant to us in the financial planning sphere is they're making all this money because obviously interest rates are going up. So they're obviously getting more in terms of people who owe them money. But they've decided mostly not to increase the savings deposit rates, which is a little bit surprising. I think it's a little bit of a shocker, to be honest. And they're not getting too much grief from what I can see. In terms of media exposure, that kind of stuff. So money market funds, other European banks are beginning to see flows from the Irish banks to them because they are offering reasonable deposit rates. So it will remain to be seen. It's, I'm sure, purely coincidental that neither of the big players, AIB and Bank of Ireland, have increased their deposit rates. But anyway, it's just, I don't know. It just goes to show that competition in every single market is required. And when you don't have it, things can take a turn for the worse for the consumer.
Andy?
Yeah, UK banks are also pretty much published near record profits. But the stock market still doesn't like them. I think Barclays is trading at something like 4.5 PE, so they're still sort of unloved on the stock market. But yeah, the spread on money is very high at the moment. I think most banks are taking a spread of, what they pay out to what they get back in, about 2.5%. So it's enormous on these enormous numbers. And obviously we're closing down bank branches, getting rid of staff, so becoming more lean businesses. So yeah, I mean, is the next 10 years going to be great?
I'm probably I'm simplifying a complex business model, right? But the spread is much bigger here in terms of, the interest rates for depositors versus interest rates for the mortgage folks. And look, more and more money is going to flow out to these money market funds and that kind of stuff. So they will have to react at some stage.
Carl, are there other deposit takers? Do you have building societies in Ireland like we have?
No, so there's permanent TSB is kind of the half I referred to, and other than that, you don't really have anything. You have like credit unions. There are some European deposit takers coming into the market for sure. The problem you'll have with that is if the consumer hasn't heard of XYZ Bank, they're inclined not to actually entrust their money with XYZ Bank, even though it might be AAA versus Irish banks are kind of double B rated. But look, it's just an interesting thing. And when you see these massive, massive profit figures, and yet, they're not rewarding savers, staff,
by the sound of things.
Or staff. That was a weird one. Anyway, Nick wants us to move on because he's got a little bit of a cold and he's not feeling great, so we'll move on.
interesting.
Next up,
Right, so let's bring the excitement
equally,
down to talk about the banking scene and talk about Bitcoin quickly.
Equally as a horrendous subject for Nick. I'm just loosely mentioning it. Obviously, Bitcoin's making an all-time high, $70,000, and at the same time, gold has made an all-time high. So again, that's kicking about. And when these things happen, obviously, certain people shout from the rooftops and try and distract our clients from what's important. But yeah, just a very brief point to note: will Bitcoin hit 100,000? When will it? Who cares? Who cares? Who knows? And same with gold. The thing about Bitcoin is the ETFs in the US, I think they've now swallowed up 53 billion they've now got in these ETF funds. That will obviously hit 100 billion at some point. The price is somewhat going to be linked to that, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah.
The BlackRock ETF, Bitcoin ETF, is now the fastest growing ETF in history. It got from 0 to 10 billion in a month or something.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, nothing further to add with that, but yeah.
Extraordinary. It's interesting though when everything is hitting peaks, Bitcoin peak, gold peak, S&P peak, there's a lot of peaks being hit.
And everyone is just so negative still about everything. It's not as if, people are popping the champagne. Anyway, back to you, boss.
Hockey docky, thank you. So next point, okay. Yes. Woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil sends the beast with wrath because he knows the time is short. Let him who... Oh, bollocks, I bollocks it up. Let him who hath understanding...
What are you on about?
Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast because it is a human number. Its number is 666, which is the number of subscribers we have to our YouTube channel, dear trappers. 666 subscribers. We are only 334 away from the magical, mythical, satanic 1,000. So thanks for that. There is a link to our YouTube channel in the so-called show notes. I was channeling my inner Steve Harris there from the song Number of the Beast and the album of the same name, which came out in 1982. Rest in peace, drummer Clive Burr. Sorry, guys, I
Their
butchered
guitarist is Adrian Smith, Iron Maiden.
Yes.
Iron Maiden.
Close
Adrian
personal
Smith.
friend, Alan?
He's
Iron
a close
Maiden.
personal friend. I haven't seen him for a while, but I used to knock around with him back in the day.
Knock around with him.
Yeah.
Did you really?
Yes.
You probably
When
saw
he
him
lived
in
up-
the
when I
pub
lived
one
up sort of
day, knock around
Henley.
with him.
No. I'll tell you
Extension of
a story
seeing somebody in the pub.
off,
Saw him in an
offline.
airport.
No. Used to see him quite regularly. He's a keen fisherman. Keen fisherman, just in case you didn't know.
Dave Murray and Adrian Smith are the two guitarists on those classic albums. Okay,
Good band.
Voice. You and the staff had an online training course.
Yeah, just very quickly. So Nick Murray did a 4-hour-long course on prospecting, right? So look, I just mentioned it because, well, number one, everyone thought there was lots of really good stuff in there, possibly too long, and maybe he makes it 4 hours to justify his the fee. But look, I just wanted to mention it because at the end of the day, we all need to be. We can't hide from this thing called sales, and getting proper training on it, and creating the right habits and being consistent with those habits is really, really important. So just wanted to mention it. Really, really good. I think it kind of comes around once a year. You got to buy a license and then you can kind of, over a 2-day period, you can kind of log in whenever you want and kind of do the course. But it was definitely a good thing for us to do. So would encourage anyone to look at this or similar stuff. But just you need to have, if you have a team, there needs to be proper training that you undergo.
I thought you weren't the biggest fan of Mr. Murray.
So I'm not, right? Because I'm not, because I've read a lot of the books and I think there's an enormous amount of repetition. Now, hey, who's to say we're not repeating a lot of stuff in the Trap podcast? But so I don't love him maybe as much as Andy does, but this one I thought, there is some really good stuff. He is consistent, to be fair, about prospecting and, being very regimented about who you're talking to the right types of people. And we have, I suppose, some experienced financial advisors here in the team, but we've also some inexperienced. So I got everyone to kind of do it together and then everyone to write their own notes. And then I'm compiling all the notes and we'll kind of share them out. So, so the fact that it was Nick Murray is possibly a little irrelevant. Proper sales training, I think, is really important.
Remember we all went for the famous lunch with the legendary Mr. Murray, and who was it piped up to say
Tony Clarkin.
Tony Clarkin, yeah, I've got a question. We all do questions, and it's like being with your headmaster because he's a kind of stern. He's got all these rules that you have to adhere to. And we're all sitting there. There's us lot.
This is what you've got to wear. This is the room it's got to be in.
Yeah,
this is the
no
alcohol that cannot be served. This is what the starter will be.
We're all sitting there
I will
quietly.
take questions for 21 minutes at the beginning.
Yeah. Tony Clarkin pipes up. Mr. Murray, I have a question. What did he say? Can I ask you how you've made a 50-year career out of saying the same thing repeatedly year after year? We all went silent. Oh!
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was a compliment. It was a compliment.
And yeah, he said, yeah, what was his answer? Because people still do stupid things, and I've got to keep on preaching the message on an ongoing basis, which I guess is why on this podcast, you're right, Carl, things will come up from time to time. We should make no apology for talking about things that we've talked about in the past, because
the principles don't really change, do they? And it's
they don't. But you can tell by every week or every month, there's more news that hits that you think, so there's still a huge swathe of the population, people, advisors, whatever, still on the journey towards learning. So forgive us if we'll repeat it.
I got a 1 star on my Maven Money podcast. The person said, he says the same thing, just buy global equities. I mean, it's a huge
time
compliment.
after time. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
Smithy.
Okay. Yeah, look, this I get probably on the same sort of thing. This is something that has been mentioned in the past, but I noticed that it came up since we did the last episode. Is this concept of double dipping cash accounts, and it kind of relates to maybe the bank story you mentioned before, Carl. And none of this was much of an issue until interest rates rocketed up in recent times. And you've got all these platforms in the UK where there's now significant amounts of cash sitting in them. And some of these organizations are sort of well known for retaining a large proportion of what is ultimately client money and keeping it for themselves. But maybe to add insult to injury, the concept of double dipping being they'll charge you a platform fee for the cash you've got in it, and they'll take a slice of the cash as well. And there's something not quite right about that, really. And the FCA had written last year, I believe, to all the one of these famous Dear CEO letters to CEOs of these platforms, saying that by the deadline, which was a couple of weeks ago, I think it was the end of February, the deadline, really, what are you going to do about it? And so they've all kind of run last minute panicking, and there's a bit of looking at the reports in the trade press that I read recently. There's still a lot of fudging going on, and we'll kind of waive the fee on the platform. We won't charge you twice, but we'll still take a big slice of the action. And honestly, where you see good practice, it's worth mentioning. I think Transact are the ones who've got this right. They do charge a platform fee, 0.2, 0.25 or something, depending on the assets. But they're paying, last time I looked, you guys might know better, 4.88.
4.86, yeah.
4.86. They're paying that. They're taking a small fee. So net, the client is significantly better off, rather than paying 2% or something when the company themselves using their treasury facility are taking 4.5%, 5%. So I think most of these platforms could learn from the likes of Transact. They're just doing the right thing. That's all we want. And it's perhaps a theme that we'll talk about later in the meat and potatoes. It's just be honest, be transparent, do the right thing by your customer. It's not your money, Mr. and Mrs. Platform. Charge the fee appropriately. Don't retain it. So this is the news, and it's yet to really be crystal clear how all the platforms are dealing with it. But there's a bit of fudging going on, to say the least. Any thoughts, Andy?
Just following on, it's not too similar to what the banks have always done. Take a margin of cash that they look after, but it just seems a bit more icky in the platform space. Most platforms earn millions, some hundreds of millions a year. Some it equates for like
Hargreaves, Christ.
Hargreaves it equates for something, again, could be wrong, about 40% of their net profits every single year. The US, Schwab and these characters, again, I'm not saying they do anything wrong. They give the tech for free, they give the platform for free, and they make their entire turnover from the slice on cash. It's a little bit like you get a free Facebook account, but we're going to steal all your information. You get a free platform, but we're going to steal all your cash returns. Is it just
some of the platforms insist, some of them, I can't remember which ones, they insist on having a minimum.
I think it's up to the FCA to decide how
fair.
platforms should deal with this. At the moment, it didn't used to be a problem when cash used to return bugger all. Now cash returns a chunky amount. So that's why,
Yeah.
you know,
I suppose
the
it's-
information
it's-
has changed. Therefore, how this should play out may have to change.
I suppose advisors need to, be doing their own due diligence, and if stuff should be moved to another platform because it would be better for our clients, then that's what you have to do.
Well, there's a bigger question as to why there's a lot of cash sitting in these accounts. There could be reasons short term for liquidity needs, etc. But these platforms exist for investing, don't they? Not for really holding cash.
Typically, a platform at any given time has 10% of their assets in cash. Transact, it's an advisor-led platform, typically has 6% in cash because the advisors are more aggressive on investing their money when it arrives, etc., etc. But typically 10% of platform assets
I think
are in cash.
the interesting thing on the averages there, Andy, is that, and we'll maybe close on this, is that Transact have said that the average cash position of 6%, because of the interest that they pay back, covers their platform fee.
You get a free platform
So the
fee.
average client on Transact is getting it for nothing at the moment. The average.
Yeah.
Now that's obviously skewed by averages can be misleading, but that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so our Norwegian oil fund, Mr. Hart.
I mean, I've been tasked for discussing this, but Alan brought it to light, but I've been quite vocal in talking about the Norwegian oil fund. Norwegian has got a sovereign wealth fund that looks after about 1.6 trillion of assets, and it underperforms a global equity portfolio because they're not 100% in global equities. And I think there's been a new article that's come out that said that they're going to apportion or direct some of this 1.6 trillion more to private equity. Obviously, it's good news for private equity, in terms of what flavour private equity, who knows, but they're going to allocate about 3 to 5% towards private equity. Why is this interesting to you, Alan?
It's interesting because it's relevant. It's relevant
Hospital
to our
pass.
It's relevant to our clients. It's relevant. It's another one of these classic. We talked about this. We had a whole meat and potatoes about this, and I thought it was a really good episode because how much have they got? Trillions. They've got trillions and trillions.
1.6 trillion USD. They're the
Right,
sort of biggest
right.
single sovereign wealth fund in the world.
And I think one of the reasons that we brought this up is because we'd all experienced situations with clients and wealthy clients, and they've got a few million quid and it's invested, and then they add more, and they say, "What else?
What's the secret?
What else have you got? What else?" And you say, "Well, the same," because people wanted to diversify into things which are more interesting. The thing I don't know if we should post a link to it in the show notes. There was an article written, and I've mentioned this before, this guy, Robin Wigglesworth, who's a journalist at the FT, been on my other podcast before, has written a book called Trillions. Really smart guy, and I like the way he writes in Alphaville, which is the free part of the Financial Times. You don't need to subscribe. All the content in Alphaville is free. So him and his team wrote this big breakdown on private equity because it's big news. If like the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world decides to allocate, all of a sudden that's a lot of money. They suddenly become the biggest private equity investor in the world overnight by allocating these sort of funds. And they've done a sort of deep dive breakdown on the history of private equity returns and where they've come from and what the likely returns are going forward. And it doesn't make for great reading. And the other thing I would sort of throw into the mix here, just another kind of related but unrelated, someone else that I know was reporting on the Alberta part of Canada, which is one of the oil producing regions of Canada, which is a big, oil production region of the world. They've had it's a regional sovereign wealth, not sovereign, but regional wealth fund for years. And they've compared the growth of that portfolio with the Norwegian one. There's some stuff that's been published recently. Way underperforms the Norwegian fund going back the last 10, 20 years. Why? Because they were big into alternatives for many years. So, I mean, the moral of the story is, why diversify? Why are you going to do? Why don't just stick to what's always worked? What's the purpose? What are you trying to achieve here, Mr. Norwegian Orwell? What's the guy's name?
Yeah, he's got a podcast that
It's really good. Carl mentioned it.
It is really good.
They basically invest 70% of the current fund is in global equities, and they've slightly underperformed the MSCI by about 2 or 3% a year since they've launched. The reason why their underperformance is a sole result of them being underexposed to global equities. If the fund was 100% global equities, they would be almost the same returns as the MSCI. Why would they now piss around and allocate a chunk to semi-illiquid asset class that they don't need. Again, you're right, Alan. It's like to our clients, what's the point? This has always worked.
Yeah,
it's
what
great.
are we
you get
trying to
returns.
achieve? You're trying to get outperformance as a result, and if so, why?
If you're trying to make a hobby out of investing,
what's wrong
go and
with
get another hobby. Stick with this. It's going to work.
Interesting. All right, moving on.
Okay. So we've had a spring budget of sorts. Doesn't feel like spring in this country. It's perpetually grey and damp at the moment. But we had it last week, and there wasn't much in it. There's not much to give away, really. We're being taxed at the highest level since 1948. We've got the highest proportion of national debt to GDP since the early 1960s. So all is rosy in socialist UK. But the Chancellor, this week's Chancellor, Mr. Hunt, threw out some things. Not much, really, but he did. Good grief. I mean, this British ISA, this 5K where you can put money into British gilts, bonds, and stocks, in addition to the standard £20,000 ISA. What a load of old crap this is! And I did put a piece on LinkedIn about it, and by my standards, it's had quite a reaction. Baroness Altman. This is one of her and that ilk. The ideas of these people is to reinvigorate the British stock market by giving Mrs. Miggins an extra 5K, which has to go into the UK stock market effectively. And it's just it's so in it. Firstly, if every Mrs. Miggins put her 5K, used up her extra allowance, by the way, most people haven't got even 20K to put their ISAs, let alone 25K, but assuming all the Mrs. Miggins put 5K into the British ISA, it would make no difference. It's such a tiny, minuscule amount. It would make no difference. The reason people don't invest in the UK, and it's mainly global equity investors who have pulled away from the UK over the last 20 years, and UK institutional investors, it's not an attractive place to list companies. There are way better places. How about we address the problem? It's like, someone's got a wound on their arm and you're just putting another plaster over it. No, address the underlying cause, address the wound, fix the bleeding, staunch it. You talk about dog days of governments and coming out with just bad ideas because they've run out of ideas and intellectual whatever energy. It's unbelievably bad. Anyway, guys, do you have any other views on that? Do you want to challenge
you're pro the British ISA, just to confirm that.
Yeah.
It's £5,000 is nothing here or there. I don't really give a monkeys. It's quite nice to have an extra wrapper. But it's so emblematic of everything that's wrong with our politicians who are just tinkering. The Titanic is going underwater and they are rearranging the bloody chairs and they do it. I think they're trolling us, but maybe they're not. Maybe they think this is genuinely a good idea. But hopefully it won't come to fruition because it's going through a consultation period. That won't start until June. And the chances are we may even have had an election by then. So hopefully this is a stillborn.
Sod's law, Nick, when this is introduced, the stock market might fly. Again, it won't be as a result of this British ISA, but sod's law, that might happen.
I don't know, how are they going to determine the funds or companies?
It's not that hard.
It's those who are listed
but you could then do UK funds. There'll be a designated list of allowable securities. It's not that hard. It will take them a weekend.
All right. No, I don't know. I think it's FTSE listed. I mean, so there are all these mining stocks that are listed in the UK and have zero employees.
Yeah.
And zero earnings in the UK.
They'll still qualify for it, Nick.
Citibank has 16,000 employees in the UK, all paying tax. It's listed in America. So that won't be. It's so.
Yeah. Of course, it's ridiculous.
Crap.
But yeah, we'll see.
The other sort of underlying fundamentals, if you look at the existing ISA allocation, there are huge. I think last time we looked, but nearly 50% is held in cash. So there's a fundamental
You're right, Alan. There's bigger problems actually. You're right.
Exactly.
Look at the existing, the billions and billions that are held in existing ISAs, and try to create much more of a culture of ownership of stocks and equities.
But the problem you've got there is you're trying to turn savers into investors. Which is huge.
What's wrong with that?
No.
Yeah, that's a cultural thing. It needs to be encouragement, education.
But turning people from savers to investors is the hardest thing someone has to do financially. Obviously, we're pro it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, but this idea, as Nick's rightly said, is not going to help at all. So those who are already investors, and you've got to be pretty well off because with a husband and wife, you already put 40,000 away, never mind pension allowances.
50K a year now,
and now you can. So there's not out of after-tax income, there's not that many people could afford to do that. Nevertheless, so it is a break for wealthy investors who are already investing in the stock market. This is not going to suddenly turn those that have got their money sitting in cash ISAs. Oh my God, hooray! I can now invest in
I'm now going to become an investor. I was a saver yesterday.
In global mining companies and other organizations. And the last word on this, I'll say, my
It will be an investing playpen. It will be an investing playpen for the wealthy. They're just going to just throw some darts at the board and just choose a load of random companies. And that's what we're pitching to our clients.
Maybe there's a bit of fun for like small cap UK stocks.
Just go
for those that are rich. I get a tax break on it. My wife is Swedish. Are we calling this thing, by the way? Is it the British ISA, the BISA?
Dad's Army ISA. They're calling it, aren't they?
Is that the BISA?
I think that should be called the PISA or the PISA. It's there to prop up the toppling UK stock market. The PISA.
In Swedish, don't bleep this. BISA means shit. True story.
Well, the Swedes are onto it already, and I approve.
Smart nation.
BISA.
All right, I think we're all in agreement that Carl is kind of zoning out that because that was a very UK-centric piece. Smithy, the folly of best buys.
Hey, you missed Carl.
Do you want to say anything about the BISA?
PR firm is priceless. I'm suffering here, Trappist. I'm suffering with a cold. I am alive.
Let's get the energy up here. Come on, Carl. Up your game here.
Is priceless.
Anyway, we're going to talk about the rugby. Come on, let's talk about the rugby. England.
No. We take the high ground. We take the high ground.
I can talk about the rugby if you want. It was marvellous to see the minnows having their day at the weekend. It really was.
It was. So. I agree, Carl.
Yeah,
good. Really give them a chance now and again.
Scotland got a battering from Italy.
Hardly.
First time they've beaten Scotland in 9 years. Had England beat Scotland, obviously Scotland just nipped us. We'd be on for the Grand Slam and the final day. I mean, can you make it up?
Had this, had that, yeah.
Yeah, it is
None
hard
of the
to
above
believe.
happened.
Yeah. Very, very
But it blows it wide open. It makes it interesting. It's good. It's nice.
Ireland has still won it, but hey-ho.
Right, Carl.
I agree. Anyway, a good PR firm is priceless. So Goodbody, who are a large stockbroking firm in Ireland, were fined by the central bank for, let me just read this, market abuse regulations laws, for contravening those laws. They were fined 1.7 million, which was reduced to 1.25 million or something like that, because they admitted it. So over a 5-year period, they didn't do what they should have been doing. And that was broken in the news on a particular day. And then there was no more about it at all. And I just went, oh my God. So here's this massive fine being doled out to a big firm. And there is no coverage in the media whatsoever about this. And I just thought, kudos to that PR firm, because they managed to absolutely bury the story. Because there have been other examples of central bank fines. Maybe they were bigger, but there was a lot of coverage and heads rolled and blah, blah, blah. So I just thought, it's kind of amazing how this works. And Ireland is so bloody small. You know,
maybe that's just my hands raised for that point. I mean, 1.25 million is not as...
Doesn't seem high for 5 years worth of market abuse.
It's tiny.
Yeah, so to be fair, so I read the central bank ruling on it, and there wasn't any particular cases where, you know, they did necessarily stuff wrong. It's just that they weren't tracking this stuff, and they didn't have the securities and the checks in places. It's just, I just thought, you know, the financial media here, who love to get stuck, to decide who they're going to get stuck into and who they're not going to get stuck into, decided to let this one just slide.
Why do you think that is, Carl? Is it? I don't know this firm. They're a big stockbroking firm in Ireland.
And they're owned. I think I'm right in saying this. Yeah, they're owned by AIB. So I just look. It's kind of linked to my other story there, right? Ireland is bloody tiny, and we need more competition. And the problem is the market is so tiny. Competition is always going to be difficult. And because it's so small, it seems to be, you know, it's who you know. And I just felt, you know, if Metas Ireland had a fine, I hope we never, ever, ever do. But, you know, it would be news, and it'd be newsworthy. And like, I bet you tons and tons of Goodbody clients don't know that this story broke. And, you know, I think this is stuff that the media should be the financial press should be covering. But then again, we've spoken about this before. Well, if they're paying for all the ads and blah, 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 well, that's the reason this stuff isn't covered. So I just thought I'd bring it up. I'm probably going to be slated for this as well, but hey, look, it's
why change the habit of a lifetime?
Exactly.
Yeah,
in for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah, there's just stuff that needs to be said, and this stuff needs to be said, and clients need to know that. Look, this is a 5-year issue that these people had, and they just, when the central bank came in and did their investigation, they put their hands up and said,
To be fair to them, Carl, it does sound a bit more, just from what you're saying, administrative issues rather than outright fraud. Outright fraud is, throw the bloody book at them.
And to be clear, I did not say there was any fraud. I'm saying it probably is, that they didn't have any checks and balances in place. But, here we are.
Years ago, that happened to Transact, didn't it? They had some
I was just thinking exactly
internal
that.
accounting issues, and there was a big
no
fine that
one
came
lost
along.
any money.
It's how they deal with it, which is the real sort of test.
Nothing nefarious, but they just had a breach of their protocols, their systems.
It's just some other fines that were meted out were like met with this like frenzy of media, oh my God, can you believe it? And
your point there, which is probably, I thought you were sort of slightly tongue in cheek. Maybe you were, but the headline of this was the value of a good PR firm. So they've obviously appointed somebody. Let's just brush out. Probably came out on a Friday night or something when everyone was sort of gone home for the weekend, and they were brushed it under the carpet, and it wasn't big news. So having what do you call it, just sort of damage limitation and brand management, all these sort of people that come out, and that's where they're
were you feverishly trying to find out who the PR firm was, Carl?
No.
We might need it for Trap.
I might know, and I might be getting a letter off them soon. But
one of your colleagues on your content project is Lincoln.
So here we are, Meadows Ireland, small firm, and we have a head of compliance, and it's front and center of absolutely everything that we do to make sure this stuff doesn't happen. And here's a big firm that are preaching holier than thou, and come on, guys, get your shit in order, please. Anyway, that's my main point.
Okay. I've just had a second email from the FCA. They emailed my firm about 2 weeks ago saying, invited me to take part in a survey. I've had a second email saying, our records suggest the survey's not been completed by your organisation. We would be grateful if you would complete it. And I'm now wondering, is this a sort of mandatory complete it or get the wrath of Khan?
Optional, but not optional.
Yeah. I tell you what.
If I was you, I'd be completing the survey.
Just do it.
I'm not telling you what to do, but I'd complete it if I was you.
I think I might do it. I think I might. Okay, sorry, Mr. Smith. Now is the time to tell us about the folly of best buy lists.
I just noticed this every now and again. I do this. When and this one, naming names, but loads of companies do this. It was Hargreaves Lansdown, biggest D2C platform provider in the country. And I think more, and we've kind of talked about this before, about the constant barrage of sort of news and exciting, hot funds and stuff to get people to buy and trade their direct holdings. And the end of 2022, they produced this paper which says, here are our analysts and researchers have put their heads together, done their homework, and said, these are the 5 funds to look out for in 2023.
God.
And they list the 5 funds, and it's sort of sad person that I am. I sometimes keep these things. I think that will be interesting to look back on a year later. And I've forgotten completely about this, but it popped up in something I looked at the other day, and I thought, all right, genuine curiosity about how they've done. They must have picked a few decent funds with all the research. So there's 5 funds they picked. Can't remember all the name of them, but each one, every single one bar one, which I'll come to in a second, generated pretty poor returns. Every one of them, bar one, generated below benchmark returns to wherever their benchmark is, which is all the other funds. Obviously, these 4 funds which underperformed were all active funds. One was an absolute return fund, one was a bond fund, one was an equity fund of some description, equity income. But they all, over the period in question, which was the year 2023, they all significantly underperformed their benchmark. The only fund that they put on the list, which is probably just there to make up the numbers, was a Legal and General. I think it's an international index fund. So it was a global index fund, and even that, by some strange reason, that outperformed the index by about 3%, which I don't quite know how an index fund outperforms by that amount. But hey, it depends what the benchmark actually was.
Yeah, they'll be benchmarking against an active global equity sector, not against MSCI World. That's why.
Okay, but there was significant outperformance. I think the moral of the story here is, these organizations, and as I say, HL are far from the only culprits, but there's no comeback on this. They push this stuff out. Here's our analysts they've done their research. These are the funds. I guarantee you, with the number of investors they've got, a number of people bought those funds on the back of that research. They would have been better off completely ignoring it. And it's back to this issue that we have raised in the past, the conflict of interest that exists between the platforms who have got a need to have people buy their funds, sell their funds, trade their funds, and each one of those things they take a margin, versus the smart thing to do, which is to own simple, effective, low-cost, index-type funds and hold them year after year after year. But that doesn't generate enough revenue for the platform. So I just thought I'd flag that up. I think it's just, no doubt if I paid, or any of us paid much attention to this thing, you'd see it time after time after time. That was just a particular one. The Hargreaves Lansdowne, their 2023 predictions were 80% terrible. Any thoughts on that?
No, I think you summed it up there, really. I think, that's fine. Yeah, agreed.
Nothing to say. Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
no, it is absolutely right.
I mean,
okay.
First and foremost, these platforms are marketing companies. They're not
Exactly.
investing wisdom companies. They're not advice companies. They're not retirement planning companies. They're marketing companies that happen to be in the business of selling funds. So, yeah, they want activity.
What we're now rechristened the investment industrial complex, right, Nick? Not the military industrial complex or the farm industrial complex. The investment industrial complex is really marketing. These are huge marketing organizations that do a bit of investing in the background.
Ogle said it in 1965. Nothing's changed. It's probably got worse.
Yeah, indeed.
That's the point, though, isn't it? It's like, we're actually saying we're doing exactly what we spoke about earlier on. We're actually just repeating the same message over and over again because it's right. And Alan, we've also spoken about star fund managers. That's why they exist, because it's lovely to tell a story around a star fund manager,
Yeah,
it is indeed.
exactly.
It is indeed. Now, I think the current Mrs. Lincoln wants to say a quick word.
Hello, dear Trappists. This is TLP. Great news. Somehow the four knuckleheads have managed to agree on a date and time and venue for the first ever Trap live event. It's happening on the late afternoon of Thursday the 9th of May. Doors open at 3:30 p.m. The venue is the historical Lola's Bar at London's famous Hippodrome Casino, right in the centre of town. Details, including a link to purchase tickets, can be found at therealadvisorpodcast.com/Trap Live. Unbelievably, people like you are actually buying tickets fast, so don't hang around. Get your tickets and come to what many people are already calling an absolute shambles. See you there.
Yes, will do, gorgeous. Looking forward to it. May the 9th, Trappists. The excitement is palpable. The tension
Not
is
sold out yet. not quite.
unbearable.
We've got about 15 tickets left, so I'm quietly confident we're going to sell it out.
Literally 15.
I'd maybe cut out the bit when you said current Miss Lincoln, Nick. Current Mrs. Lincoln. But,
You telling me what to do?
Yeah, just a word, friend to friend.
Don't tell another man what to do.
I'd cut out the current.
Sandy
but anyway.
Hart comment.
That's a recurring line in our WhatsApp group. Are you telling me what to do?
Right. Introduced by Ultra. Okay, so let's move on to what many people call the meat and potatoes of this show. St James's Place. We had our first long-form discussion of St James's Place in episode 15, which was 26 episodes ago. Now, we release an episode bi-weekly. That means every other week, Andrew. So that's 26 times 2. It's exactly a year ago we had episode 15. And SJP, we need to talk about it again because that brand is in the news for a whole host of reasons. Over the last year or so, they firstly came out with the reduction in their charging schedule and the removal of exit penalties and so forth, which was big news. And that had a direct correlation on the share price. And then the last couple of weeks or so, I'm not going to use the word scandal, but this news is broken about SJP doing an internal review, checking who of their 958,000 clients is getting an ongoing service for which they are all paying for. And it turns out, by the way, I'm going to preface this, there are lots of SJP partners who are delivering the ongoing service, but when the shit hits the fan, everyone gets a little speck of it on them, and there are a significant cohort of SJP clients who have not been getting their ongoing service for which they are paying, and no matter how you want to slice or dice that is pretty diabolical. You don't need Consumer Duty to tell you that. If Consumer Duty makes you think that's a bad thing, then you shouldn't be in this thing of ours in the first place. It's a bad thing to charge anybody and then not deliver on a service you said you were going to deliver on for that fee. Flat out wrong. So that's driven their share price down even further. It was 31st of December 2021, the share price was around 1,700. It's now down to about 470 pence, I presume that's pence. So a decline of 72% in the value of SJP. So they've got issues going on. I understand this is very much a trigger subject for certain people out there, SJP. The IFA forum that I managed, the Google group thing, there's a guy in there who said he listened to one episode of Trap and then said, I'll never listen to it again. It was such a love-in for SJP. Oh, whatever. I thought it was quite a balanced episode 15. It's certainly our most downloaded one. And we know that it went quite high up into the echelons at the SJP management. And there is a view that the SJP model was probably unravelling prior to these latest revelations, hence them reducing their charges and so forth. There seems to be some discontent with a significant number of partners within the SJP partner practice model. And there's also this other thing going on where they're going to make a move to incorporating passives in their business model. Not entirely, but they're going to start bringing them in, which must be a very interesting discussion for a brand that for over 30 years or so, their whole cachet, this is what makes us special, was we're going to pick the very best active managers and we're going to have an investment community to monitor these managers and make sure you, Mr. and Mrs. Client, are getting the very best active management you can. And now to bring in passives, that'll be an interesting thing to see how that pans out. So there's loads going on with SJP at the moment. Why is this of interest to an IFA? Well, a couple of things. The main thing is don't be too smug about this, okay? If these claims firms are going after SJP now because of a lack of ongoing service for which clients have been paying, that lighthouse will eventually turn its beam onto our sector. So you better make sure you're delivering a service to your clients if clients are paying for it. And if you better have evidence that you've gone to those clients every year or every 6 months and at least offered them the chance of a planning session or a review service, whatever you call them. If you don't be smug about this because you're going to be in trouble. And it's just very, very front of house, and perhaps potentially for IFAs as well. There's a good chance you're going to pick up some SJP business. I don't know. There must be disgruntled SJP clients out there who are looking for a proper full fat financial planning. I'll use that phrase again because there's another guy in the IFA forum who doesn't like that phrase. So I'll say it a third time. Full fat financial planning. You might have the chance to pick up some business from SJP. So I'm throwing that over to the group. Carl, stop laughing. And who am I going to hand over to? Mr. Hart Ultra.
Okay, yeah, a very triggering subject for lots of advisors, and there's lots going on. So first disclosure, in my consultancy role, I work with SJP and have done for years. I'm generally helping them implement their goal-based financial planning. I've trained loads of their partners. Lots of them listen to Trap. Lots of them come to Hum. So the ones I see are generally, let's say, the good eggs, the ones that want to learn. Of course, there's close to, I think, 4,500 advisors. So you get a good, a big mix. But the latest changes are huge. It's their biggest change they've ever gone through in the history of the firm. So there is certainly a lot going on. But I still maintain that predominantly they're providing financial advice and investment management with a human touch. And I think they're a high-end vanilla firm. They use funds, Yes, they're not the best performing funds, compared to some alternatives potentially, but they don't buy individual stocks. They generally are looking after pensions. So they're helping Middle England plan their retirement, which is the biggest financial, societal issue. And out of all the money they look after, they're predominantly global equities, which is, again, something I've been banging on about for years and something also I'm very pro. The latest accounts show that they're 76% in global equities. And the numbers are huge. As Nick said, 958,000 clients, close to 1 million clients. And these clients are not, all idiots. If they were getting no service, they wouldn't be clients as such. They've got obviously the academy, which is what we speak about, which is bringing the next generation through. And they're doing, I think, better work in that space than anyone else I've seen. Obviously, people like Next Gen are doing some great stuff, but they've got the sort of full service model through. And as I say, they do proper financial planning, tax wrappers, getting clients to increase their contributions. They're not selling trash that blows up. They're self-insuring all the stuff that they sell, so they want to be a clean business. Should I continue? The people I think are the real sharks in this business, the real pirates in pinstripes, are the DFMs that just do investment management, not even investment advice. Yeah, some firms charge minimum 1% plus VAT, even higher, 1.5%. And all they do, and all these other smoke and mirror costs, extract value over time. They provide zero financial planning, zero tax strategy. They overcomplicate for profit. They hide behind quarterly investment reshuffles, reports, pinky rings, fancy coffee. They use words like wealth preservation. These are the firms that boil my blood. And some people are paying 2 or 3% for absolutely nothing apart from investment management. They're certainly not getting any proper financial planning reviews. So back to SJP, if they're charging, pick a number, 2%, but you're getting proper financial advice, getting invested in generally global equities, and some tax planning has been added to it, I think the guns are focused in the wrong direction. IFAs lose their mind over SJP for some reason. Each to their own, but I see things slightly differently. My final point is on the other end of this market. The robos online. There's companies like Nutmeg, Pension B. They charge all in 1% for zero advice, proudly zero advice. And most of them get all the asset allocation wrong. So you're paying for asset misallocation because you fill in some mumbo jumbo questionnaire and you end up with a portfolio that's not predominantly invested in global equities. No advisor, nobody to call you. Nobody for you to call, nobody to know your situation. So we've got the extreme of robos charging 1%, the real sharks charging 2-3% for wealth extraction, and then we're sort of in the middle. And I'd put SJP with us. We're the human advisor. But yeah, if they have clients that have been paying for a service that haven't been receiving it, this is unacceptable. And Consumer Duty has unearthed that. But you're right, Nick. It shouldn't take Consumer Duty to tell a firm that if someone's paying for a service, they should be getting something out of it. So there's a few points there.
Brilliant, Andy.
Nick.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think it came to light. It wasn't necessarily Consumer Duty, was it? I think that SJP didn't have a sort of CRM system in place for a number of years, or they had an in-house one that just wasn't up to it. And they brought in Salesforce in 2021 and migrated the clients onto there. And suddenly they looked through the past pattern of appointments and emails out saying, do you want it's time for us to get together, and thought, hold on, there are swathes of clients here who haven't even been offered this. So I think that maybe it can join with Consumer Duty.
My final point on the DFM, if the regulator is going to say we need activity to show ongoing service, I understand it, but what I mean is it's hard. Okay, so what's going to happen is they're just going to do quarterly investment reshuffles and say, oh, we've done everything. And all they've done is add a shadow more fee. Oh yeah, but we're sussing the market out and we're keeping an eye out and we're making tweaks. So again, the regulator, obviously an annual planning review that's lifestyle, financial planning focused, what's going on with your life, what's changed, how's the family getting on, that's the good stuff. Obviously that needs to be recorded. But if the FCA are going to go down on investment firms and say that we need to see activity, again, it's going to promote, bad investment behavior. So it's a grey area on that side.
Just before we had also, 958,000 clients with about 4,500 partners.
Bingo.
That's on, and again, it's an average. So to take this with a pinch of salt, but that's over 200 clients per advisor. It's really hard, really hard to offer an ongoing full fat planning service.
If you got
for 212,
Nick, sorry, just to chip in. Remember, a lot of the admin, a lot of compliance, a lot of the regulator stuff is taken care of. Our lives.
I get that, Fred. I get that, but I'm talking about the emotional stuff.
Yeah.
You can form deep friendships. Well, you, Andy, with about 3 people, me with about 2.
You're struggling with about 5, and you, Nick.
Five's too many, mate. Once it gets to the
60% of your.
Once it goes to the thumb, I'm buggered. But they reckon about 100 people. 125 people is the number that you could probably maintain some kind of emotional relationship to. And that's the human bandwidth sucked up.
Sorry, my final point. The advice gap is going to grow after this because obviously larger firms are going to struggle to service smaller value clients. If they're going to, someone's got a 30 grand pension, do I need to see them every year? Again, we can argue that all day. Or is it just okay that I charge them a small fee that my firm can still be profitable, but we're there if you need us? Again, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm saying the advice gap will increase now. And then people will end up with Nutmeg and Pension B or whoever, 1%, and getting nothing.
The law of unintended consequences, my friend.
Yeah,
Storyteller, you've been You've been quiet for 15 minutes. I can see the steam coming out of your ears, my friend. Crack on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a huge subject. And I think obviously we started off by looking at SJP, but it's far, far wider than that. SJP share price has collapsed. But if you look at, so has Aberdeen, so has Rathbones, so has Schroders, none to the same extent, but most of the main players in retail, Hargreaves, in retail, financial, investment, advice, whatever you want to call it. Sorry, Nick. Yes.
Well, I was going to say, quilters are looking to shed loads of their advice. These models are struggling.
There is. We've kind of talked about this a bit before. There's a lot more going on underneath the bonnet here.
Loads.
Right, the SJP thing came in because of this very specific, with that number of advisors. There is a consumer duty related thing. Yes, there probably was something about maybe some of these reviews were being done but weren't being adequately recorded. But that's a problem in and of itself if you've no way of evidencing this stuff. But hand in hand with this goes, we talked about this an episode or two ago, this kind of global transition towards low cost, more transparent index type investing. I think we reached this tipping point where passive investments, for want of a better description, are now more than 50% of the global kind of investment management world. The world is more transparent. People are looking increasingly at value for money. We've referred to press and media before. There's lots and lots of press reports on this. So these organizations that have historically taken a significant margin from money management have been proven. This is not news. This has been around for decades. But I think sometimes things do take years and years and decades to happen, and then all of a sudden the world catches up, and there's a kind of snowball effect. And it's really impacted. And so more and more people are looking at this. Don't forget, we talked about this before. The FCA have, for some time now, have had these value assessments in place, which historically were a bit of a joke because you had got to mark your own homework and say, yeah, they're quite good value for money, even though it's underperformed the index or the benchmark for year after year after year. So my kind of just sort of broadening this conversation, I find it very interesting. I really do. There was a book written many years ago by a Harvard professor called Clayton Christensen, who's written a lot of books on this sort of subject, but in business in general, it's called The Innovator's Dilemma. And it's this idea, large companies and incumbents, they often have a challenge. The very reason that they become successful over time is the very reason they should disrupt themselves. But of course, all these companies that we've talked about are listed businesses. They've got shareholders. Now, if you're an SJP shareholder right now, you are the least happy of all of them. The clients some of them are probably unhappy, but some of them are perfectly reasonable. A lot of the advisors there are still doing okay. But a shareholder having a 70% reversal in the last few years, they're probably the least happy of all. So what do you do? Now, again, I'm drawing a few comparisons from the broader world of just commerce. I think it was the last one we talked about Google, for example. Now they've got a whole lot of other issues there, but they've dominated the search space again for years. All of a sudden, they're coming under pressure with likes of Perplexity, some internal cultural issues going on here. So the investor's dilemma. The history is littered with organizations that dominated for decades and decades and decades until they didn't. And the speed at which they didn't, once it was unearthed, happened quite quickly. So Kodak, Blockbuster, Nokia, BlackBerry, you name them, these were dominant players. St. James's Place, dominant player by a country mile, the largest wealth management company in the UK. The underlying issue here, I think, is cultural. From what I see, I've got no inside view whatsoever. I know, as we all do, some people who work there. I have a few off-the-record conversations. Generally speaking, positive people, professional people. But there's a general view that the culture which was built for the last several decades was predominantly a sales culture. I grew up in a sales culture, nothing wrong with it. But at some point, if you're delivering a service, there's a difference between a sales culture, out-and-out sales culture, was all about the initial fees and gathering assets, and an ongoing service culture, which is predominantly about looking after your existing customers and clients and giving them a world-class service and being rewarded for it. So long story short, there is I think the next 2 years for St. James's Place, not just them, but a lot of other organizations who are in the same boat, it's make or break. They'll either get their act together. They've got a new CEO in place, from what I gather, and he's getting all the bad news out as far as he knows, unless there's more bad news to come. We don't yet know if there's more. There's a lot of bandwagon jumping, these kind of ambulance chasing. There's a firm of lawyers who are all over this. Their view is, something was published recently, can't remember the name, 3 letters, AKC or something like that. But they really see a bonanza for the legal profession, ambulance chasing legal profession. Their view is that 70% of SJP customers are in for some sort of compensation. Obviously, they would say that. They're talking their own book. But this is going to, the next couple of years is going to be clearing out the stables. They're going to have to really clear up their act. And it depends upon, if you've been brought up, if you're a 55-year-old advisor there, been working there 25 years, do you want to be part of the new culture? Do you really want to do that? Because they're going to have to clean their act up. And they're going to have to almost cannibalize their business model upon which they become, great at what they are doing. So I would say this is the blockbuster moment for St. James's Place. They're either going to have to recognize that Netflix is the new model and people want different services, different value for money, greater transparency, or they're going to stick to their guns and say no, that because of the culture in the business, because the predominant senior people or a lot of the advisors say this is the way that it's worked for me. So I think we're at a really interesting point in history in UK retail financial services, and the next couple of years are going to determine the direction of travel. Andy?
Yeah, following on from the book, The Innovator's Dilemma. I mean, SJP are an example of disrupting themselves. This is their disrupting themselves moment. So yeah, you're right. It is make or break for the next block of time. Over to you, Carl.
Yeah, I suppose, look, I don't have necessarily skin in this game because SJP aren't in Ireland, and they're not competitors of mine. And I do see, because of this podcast, I'm linked in with tons and tons and tons of UK advisors. And I see some particular advisors, all they want to do is post LinkedIn stuff about how terrible this. Yeah. It's tiresome. And you know what? I don't know who they're aiming that at. Are they just looking for pats on the back from other advisors or what? I don't know. But if I was a client looking at somebody just putting out all this detrimental stuff about another firm, it would become tiresome for me. I think Alan hit the nail on the head there, right? And Andy has alluded to it as well, right? They've identified that this ain't going to work going forward, and they've said we are going to have to take some massive pain. We're going to have to. I love what you just said there, Andy. We're going to have to disrupt ourselves. And the one thing I would say, Alan, about Kodak or Blockbuster or whatever, those businesses went out of business because of technological advancements. This actually is a service business, and they full fat financial planning. There we go again, Nick.
Good lad.
It's relatively new, and it's definitely much newer than SJP. So SJP have figured out, okay, we're going to have to get into doing full fat financial planning. Passive investing is something that, people are looking for. So I applaud the leadership in SJP to say we are going to take some serious flack, serious pain, and our shareholders, get ready. This is going to go pear-shaped. But it's not easy scale a business with full fat financial planning. That's going to be their challenge because they scale the business on selling funds, moving on, selling funds, moving on. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't invest in individual stocks, but if I did, I'd be investing in SJP now, because we know that this business is broadly speaking really, really, really sticky. So I can't see them losing a whole ton percentage-wise of their almost million customers. They're going to fix it, or they're going to at least try. They will lose some for sure, but they'll be in a stronger position going forward. So, and the other point is, they do a lot of good stuff as well. And it is there's loads of good stuff in there. And I would say watch this space. They're certainly not going away because they are taking the pain. It'd be much worse, folks, if they just buried their head in the sand and said, let's just keep going for as long as we can. They're not doing that.
Well,
At least they're trying to make changes.
We're not apologists. There's part of the organization that definitely, we spoke about it as Nick mentioned already, our previous episode. Historically, they're expensive. Their funds are expensive, and as a consequence of that, they underperform. That's the thing. It's not a great place. You wouldn't recommend your friends or family historically. I certainly wouldn't recommend friends and family to use them ahead of a high quality, independent, proper planning firm, for sure. And they were a mass market business. But I think there's a couple of interesting points that come out of this. And just to summarize what a couple of you have already said, the key issue here, the starting point, is the delivery of promises, right? We promised we'd do an annual review, but what makes up an annual review is yet to be determined. What does that mean? As Andy already talked about this, does that mean I'll send you a letter once a year with a statement of your portfolio and say you're up 10%, you're down 10%? Does that qualify? Because you go from it's like quantitative and qualitative, because you can say we did 100%, client reviews this year, therefore we've justified our fees that we've retained on it. But then different people want different things. I've often looked at, when I can be bothered, I look at other organizations in a listed business and they publish there. Again, I think one of the very first episodes we did was we talked to the SJP's numbers, and for years they've come in for so much negative publicity. The Times, as we know, Sunday Times, what's his name, Ali Hussein, seemed to be a vendetta, and it's the first few reports he did were quite interesting. I thought, ha, and then eventually got pretty dull because it's week after week after week. but regardless of that, their numbers were they relentlessly grew, and the assets under management continued to grow. So clearly they were doing something right. But there's a whole lot of different things here. If you've got 200 clients, it is very difficult to do the sort of work we do. When I looked at the published accounts of them, I thought, how can this organization be so profitable? I know there's other things about taking margin on funds and everything else, but I see this a lot. And I want to just sort of wrap up my view. And I've got to be very careful what I say. And I'm not going to go public on this at all. There's an ongoing situation that we've got. And I told you guys offline. But I see some other stuff out there, nothing to do with SJP, just outrageously sharp practice that exists. And it relates to people, which to the generic term would be discretionary fund managers, discretionary portfolio managers, who are there just to, in theory, manage money. And when you do a bit of a deep dive and analysis, they do it really badly. They don't just marginally underperform a benchmark or an index, they woefully underperform. They're buying a lot of individual stocks, really, really poor. They're charging like a wounded rhino for this service. Zero planning, zero kind of collaborative, family-based experiences, just basic, really bad money management. And those, to my mind, are the ones that should be really worried about their future. And
they're
depending
a
on
one-trick
how
pony,
these
Alan.
things,
They're a one-trick pony. They
And
just
I
look
think-
after money badly. They look after money badly and extract wealth. At least SJP.
And they are telling people that their
financial
fees are
advice.
going to be like 1.5%, and then actually when you
once
do
you've
a
added it all up,
layer upon layer
you're
of non-disclosed
hold on,
fees.
You said it was going to be 1.5. It's actually 3% a year.
Yeah,
Like
and it's
buried
buried away in all the in 75-page documents that no client looks at.
Exactly.
And I think if I was these organizations, they should be the ones really concerned, because look, we're not here to.
I know they should be concerned, Alan, but I think they've got such a long runway. Let's say you're a very bad DFM investment manager and you're looking after 100 billion. There's a lot of them out there. I still think they've got 10, 15, 20 years before it all falls out the bottom.
Well,
so
we'll see. It will
there's
be
still
interesting
lots
to
more
see.
school fees to be paid for out of that gravy train for them.
So the FCA have started clearly with the biggest in the country, right? So they've had. It's clear that the senior management at St James's Place has been in. I was going to say Canary Wharf. I don't know if the FCA moved, but they've been having close negotiations with the regulator for, I would say, probably a year, maybe longer than this. And then relatively recently, another Dear CEO letter went out to the next 20, the CEOs, the next 20 top wealth manager, IFA advice, not IFA, advice firms, or some of the names that we've mentioned already, whether it's Quilter, Openwork, some of the big players. So they're next in the sites. I've got to assume that in due course, the discretionary managers, these underperforming double-barreled name people who are just rent-seeking. They're just basically riding on the back of their, talking the right language, with never any deep analysis. That has to be next in the gun sights of the regulator.
Absolutely.
Has to be, because
absolutely.
honestly, the things I'm seeing, and I've shared some of the things with you guys, it's outrageous. It boils my blood. It's just complete. It's borderline criminal, frankly.
It's white-collar crime. Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Okay. Well, that's said with passion. I think we gave the latest SJP episode a pretty decent, balanced hearing there. So it'll be interesting to see how things pan out. As we've all said in different ways, the game has changed, and things are certainly underfoot and changing rapidly. And it'll be interesting times. Maybe live in interesting times, as one of those old Johnnies once said. Okay, now I can see on my little Nest camera that Posty is walking up my drive. She's hauling a bulging sack over her shoulder. And it's a sack full of Trappist questions posted by you, our beloved audience, the Trappist audience. If you want to send us a question, there's a link in the show notes. Click on it. We will get to them. I think today's question is from, I think it's the tail end of last year. So we are gradually getting there. Let's have a look and open up this envelope and see who this one is from. This is from a chap who's only given his first name, Will. He's got a LinkedIn profile, though, so Will Bennett. Okay, there you go. It's in your profile. Thanks, Will. We'll put a link to that in the so-called show notes. Will says, Jesus wept. I've got a cold, guys. You don't make this easy. I'm a youngish IFA, turning 29 in November, and have been in the industry for 7 years or so. I've been listening to the podcast for a while and find it really helpful to get outside perspective on financial planning other than those I work directly with. I know you are all advocates of passive investment strategies, and I understand that over a long-term financial plan, this is likely to generate excellent returns, arguably more so than active managers can provide. But in the current climate, it's always the current climate, it's always the new thing. But in the current climate, with advances to tech and the availability of information, and markets becoming more sensitive to sentiment, is there an argument to explore active strategies in the hope of a more comfortable journey for clients, possibly at the cost of not beating well-known indices? If you can achieve decent long-term returns but have a smoother journey, is that not what clients want? Okay, I'll quickly go, and then guys, you want to join in. If you want a smoother journey, if you want to give up some of the temporary declines, you are going to definitely give up the permanent advance. You cannot have one or the other. Volatility is your friend. And I don't really have much to add on that, guys.
Will, go all in on active management. I'll see you in 10 years.
Nice one. First of all, just this word, there's an undercurrent there. And I hear this quite a lot about, almost said with distaste, passive investing. So let's just be clear, there's no such thing as passive investing. Everything is a choice. Everything is a decision. You've got to asset allocate. You've got to choose what index to track. So it's not passive at all. I talk about just efficient. It's efficient deployment of capital. So when you recognize eventually that the most important thing is this, Andy just called it a minute ago, goals-based financial planning. It's recognizing where you are today and what a good life looks like in the future. Once you recognize that as being the most important part of a financial planner's role, the next stage really is to recognize you just need to get there with the most efficient, reliable, low-cost, predictable, transparent, blah, blah, blah methodology. And you want to streamline everything and distill everything down to first principles. First principles is just about capturing the returns that are generally available to everyone else out there. All this stuff, Will, with love and respect, to say because there's more information available, there's more market becoming more sensitive to sentiment. That's just a word
salad.
Like
it's just
telly, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't really mean anything. And if there is more information, access to information, well, the market understands it. All I would say is do your research. Listen to past episodes of this podcast. Go and meet with the likes of Vanguard. Go and meet with the likes of Dimensional. Go and sit on their courses. Look at the research. Look at the evidence. Look at the facts. Read SPIVA, the Standard & Poor's index reports that they do. And we just need to move away from this investment industrial complex that makes you ask questions like this, because it's kind of irrelevant. You just want to help your clients to live a fulfilled life and in the most, as I say, simple, reliable, predictable manner. That's it.
So thank the Lord, it took me only a year to get out of the investment industrial complex or whatever you're talking about, Alan. So for about a year, I was sort of randomly picking funds. I didn't know the hell what I was doing. And then I found the asset class type investing. So thank God it took me only a year. I know obviously other people had a longer journey.
It took me longer. It took me quite a few years.
But Will has come into this business in 2017, where we're abundant of information. I came into this business in 2008. There was a lot of information, but it wasn't available like it is now. So still 7 years in, he's obviously not yet seen the asset class in investing light. He may never do. I'm not saying it's
a lot of that is about, and I had an offline sort of DM exchange last week with a young advisor. It wasn't Will, somebody else. And the issue is you are a product of the people you spend your most time with. God help us. So
that's exactly
in
the point,
Will's
isn't
firm,
it? Yeah.
there'll be a bunch of older guys who are just picking funds, and everyone will always remember. It's like Andy Hart, the casino attendant. He remembers when he won £1,000, but he forgets the 10 other times that he lost money. Everyone remembers their winners and forgets their losers. So all the people, and I used to be around people like that, and they'd say, well, I put my clients' money into Terry Smith 10 years ago, or this fund or that fund, but they forget the 99 other funds that were a disaster. And I think that's the issue. So, and I mean, probably the people that Will works with are good people, but be prepared to challenge the conventional thinking in your organization. Seek information and evidence from outside your immediate circle, because it's likely to be, tarnished with 25 years of thinking. And do your research. There's plenty of books, magazines, podcasts, all about this very sort of thing. Carl, any further thoughts?
Not really. Look, like Will is 29, so you're not young-ish, Will. You're very young, right? So fantastic that you're exploring these issues now. And just as Alan said, just be careful, who you're kind of being guided by. And that's much easier said than done. If you're in a firm and, you're hanging around with these people all the time, obviously you're going to be wondering, are those trap guys for real or are these guys for real? So I would say fair play. I think the interesting thing is a lot of the questions we're getting here are broadly asking the same thing. And it's basically, are you sure, lads, about this whole passive thing? And look, we've done our research.
After a few pints, we'll be like, no, do you know what? Yeah, we don't actually really believe it.
We're all into active. Let's go back to active.
I'm all into PayPal.
Yeah, but thank you, Will, for the question and keep doing great work, I would say.
Okay, lovely. And I said it before that there are scores of advisors, for right or wrong, who have eschewed active fund management and gone down the passive route, whatever verb you want to use. I don't know any that have gone the other way. They've done that and then thought, you know what, I miss picking funds and I miss being held accountable for the fact that fund managers had a bad period because the style rotation has gone against the secular movement of the yin against the yang and all that other utter bollocks. Okay, let's go. 1 hour, 17 minutes.
It's a great point. It is that actually is a really great point.
Nobody's gone back the other way.
I don't know anyone who has gone the other way. That's a great point.
Single bed to a double bed. Nobody goes back the other way.
Yeah.
So Will, take what you will from that, my friend, and thank you for your question. Okay, let's move on to Culture Corner. Wow. Silence from me. Over to you. Who's ready to go?
I'm ready.
Good man.
Born ready. My Culture Corner is simply a book. One book recommendation is called The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch, Koch, just to be precise. You know what got me into this? Carl mentioned a few episodes ago the book Benjamin something or other, 10x is easier than 2x. Yep. So I read that and it's a great book and it really gets you thinking. And that then led me on to, it was probably came up in my Kindle. If you read this, you'll like this. So then I read, so I've just read this book, 80-20 Principle. Now, there's nothing new in it, but the application of it, when you begin to really think about it in all aspects of your life, that 80% of the rewards that you do are often gained from 20% of the activities and various things, personal life, professional life, profitability in your business, any number of other things. And the author is a very established kind of management consultant guru who started various different companies, gives you practical examples of this. And I really think it's relevant to anyone running if you're running a financial planning business, definitely relevant. But if you're an advisor running a book of clients, definitely relevant and also relevant to your personal life. So I've really enjoyed reading the 80-20 principle. Thank you.
Nice.
Carl, you're next.
Oh, right, okay. Mine is a... One of these days, I'm going to be on it, and I'll get Culture Corner right. Oh, dear. Mine is a reshare that Nick shared this before Christmas. And there's a specific reason or two that I'm actually resharing. So, number one, because I didn't have anything else. But no, I thought this one was really good. It's an episode of Patrick O'Shaughnessy's Invest Like the Best podcast, and it's John Collison of Stripe fame interviewing Charlie Munger when Charlie Munger was 98, so that's a year before he died. It is absolutely fantastic, and it's like the young buck interviewing the old buck, and I'm probably somewhere in between, so I can kind of try and jump between both points of view.
In between in terms of the wealth, Carl.
But
Collison is Ireland's richest man.
He's not actually, but along with his brother, Stripe has been valued at 65 billion only in the last week or two. And a fun fact, John and Patrick Collison went to the same school that my 4 kids are going to. So no pressure, kids.
There's hope yet.
that pension plan might actually come true. But no, I thought John Collison is absolutely fabulous in the interview. Obviously, super, super clever guy. He's super respectful, but they actually had a which is one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up. They did have a slight disagreement about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but it was a really good back and forth, and it was kind of two different views. And yes, I've been one saying, cryptocurrency bad, and then cryptocurrency hits all-time record highs this week. So if you're interested, no, but at the same time, it will be remiss of me not to mention that, right? If you're interested in kind of a really balanced argument, I think it's really, really good. And just Charlie Munger just comes out with just gold nuggets. Like Collison said, what's one of the secrets to your success? So this is one of the most famous investors of all time. It's like, just surround yourself with really great people who inspire you every day. The rules are simple here, folks.
That's where we're going wrong. That's where we're going wrong.
Yeah. So I'd like to announce my resignation from No, but Nick, sorry, I didn't listen to it back when you recommended it, but it's definitely, I would say, if you're interested in our world at all, right, investing at all, this is absolutely brilliant and really entertaining actually as well.
And if you've missed it this time, I'll recommend it in 4 months' time, just to square that circle.
It's a good podcast, isn't it? O'Shaughnessy's podcast. You've got to be a little bit. I have to be a bit selective because some of them are just so deep in the weeds about some investment stuff. But there's been some really good ones over there.
Yeah.
To get Charlie Munger just before he died, even say a year, but 98, and obviously he's gone now. That's what a thank the Lord that happened. Okay, my culture corner. Not all the culture corners are great things. We sometimes pick on content that we don't think is so great. And Seth Godin, I know you guys love him. And I read Tribes. Yeah. The good thing about Tribes is it's only 137 pages. The bad thing about Tribes is it's still 137 pages. And
I was surprised when I saw this come up on the list. I thought, well, Nick's he's finally understood what Seth's all about. So you just brought it up as what not to read. Have you?
Kindle has this thing of they do 99p days, don't they?
Yeah.
Well known, but I thought, okay, sorry, I'll get Tribes and Nice. And I read it. With a lot of these people, and the Simon Sinek and all these people, I'm reading it, I'm going, okay, I'm waiting for something to really knock me off. It's just like, nah. Get what? What are you telling me? It's just empty aphorisms.
Create art.
So I didn't.
This is an example of Seth Godin shipping, getting content out there, feeling vulnerable, doing your work in public.
Ship your work.
This is all Seth.
Ship your work. Well, that's hardly original, is it? I mean, there's Stephen Pressfield, there's Austin Kleon. It's all just do the work. But yeah, fine. I think Seth Godin had one success early on in his career, didn't he? And he's kind of morphed off that. Really, if that's litigious, that was Andy Hart saying that. Okay, we have 2 more points.
Over to me. Okay, so my first point is there's a daily email. A few of these go around, but this one's
How
really
come you get
good.
2 every time, by the way?
I just thought I'd do two because the rest of them look pretty boring, especially Carl regurgitating. Anyway, leave it to me. So the email recommendation is there's a company there's a company in the US called Morning Brew Daily Email. So Google Morning Brew Daily Email. Finance nerds, investing with nerds will love this one. It's sort of an aggregator of information that's happened the previous day. Really good. My final recommendation is absolute must-watch on Netflix. It's totally insane, this documentary series. 3 episodes. It's called The Billionaire, the Butler, and the Boyfriend. It's a real story about the lady who was the daughter of the founder of L'Oreal. She was the richest woman in the world. The richest woman in the world now is the granddaughter, so the daughter of the founder of L'Oreal. She's worth over 100 billion. It is insane. The amount of money this lady had, and people were just swindling her out of money like you wouldn't believe. Financial advisor, he was up to all sorts. The sort of temporary boyfriend, who wasn't quite a boyfriend, he was just into swindling elderly women. Don't get any ideas, Nick. It is just brilliant. The checks she was writing, she paid all of her staff in cash. I mean, they were obviously putting it through for tax, but she just paid them in cash. She was paying her gardener 120 grand a year, euros, and the accountant 400 grand. It's insane. This lady had so much money. In the end, this guy swindled her for €1 billion. Didn't even touch the sides. It's like me swindling Nick Lincoln for £6.50. It wouldn't even touch the sides.
Wouldn't touch the sides.
It's so crazy in this film. Certainly, if you're a financial advisor, if you're into money, it's the business story.
I haven't seen that. Is it new? Is it new on Netflix?
No, it's not new. I mean, this poor old lady, the daughter of the founder of L'Oreal, she basically had Alzheimer's for 10 years, but because she's rich and eccentric and mad, she's sort of okay. And we can just let her do stuff. I mean, people come to her and say, oh, my daughter, she needs a new dress. She's like, how much do you need? 200,000 euros? It wasn't like a new dress. What is it? 70 euros? Like every check she wrote was 6 figures. And it was...
It's nuts.
I'm
going to
so
watch
mad.
That's
good.
Fabulous. No, we don't have to watch it. You've told us everything about it.
I'm not going to ruin the last bit about it. It's just you can't take your eyes off it.
Yeah,
she does unfortunately pass away. No shit. Definitely check it out. It's a strong recommendation. Let me know what you think. It came out about a year and a bit ago. It's wild.
All right.
Okay, cool. Right, 1 hour, 28 minutes. I think the tech has worked. So we will say that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you, dear Trappists, for your precious time and your input into this show. If you listen to the podcast, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way, every other Thursday, a new episode lands on your phone, freshly baked. It's all done for you. All you got to do is play it, stick your headphones in. We do all the heavy lifting. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, 666, the number of the beast. La 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 la.
Buy your trap tickets if you're still on the fence.
Only 15 left. Get in now. It's going to be a fun night.
TheRealAdvisorPodcast.com. TheRealAdvisorPodcast.com.
Exactly. That's the place to go to get your tickets for the event. Well, many people are calling the event of May. Okay, let's go. Get out my computer. Love you loads. Love you, Trappists. Goodbye. Take care.
I'm off to listen to Iron Maiden.
Bye-bye.
Do it.
Bye.
Number of the Beast, 1982. Brilliant.
Stop.